Thank you. It's my apologies for not being here for Q&A today. It's kind of fits into the superannuation in a sort of a rather sort of morbid sense. My father-in-law passed away on Tuesday, my wife's dad, Leo, so we had a funeral at 10 o'clock. So if any of you at the AMP AGM wondered why I turned into Effie Zahos, that's why. And then the wake commences at 1:30 with my family and so on, other family members. So excuse me for not being here for the Q&A. But it is, you know, it does really, in a sense, fit into this subject matter, I think, really interestingly. I used to be an innovator. Some 35 years ago, I started IPAC as Australia's first fee-for-service firm. And 35 years ago, that was regarded as pretty radical. In fact, I had a large number of, what do you do if you're 27 and starting a business? You go and consult your elderly or senior peers in the industry. And they all said to me, well, that won't work, son. And I said, why not? And they said, well, people won't pay for advice. It's all free. And I said, yeah, that's free because it's crap. And they said, yeah, but it's still free. I said, it's just complete rubbish. You know, it's conflicted nonsense. You know, you get 30% commission for flogging some crappy savings plan back then. You get 40% commission for flogging a tax scheme, which we all know is going to fail. Most people back then, the right advice was pay off your mortgage. Guess what? No commission. So you're going to be anywhere vaguely on the customer's, the client side of the desk, unless in actual fact you're non-conflicted. And IPAC grew a very big business. I'm still on the board there today. It got too big. We had offices in 8 countries, had about over $10 billion under management, and we a lot of money for 5 guys who each owned 20%. So we sold it to AXA, and then AXA got acquired by AMP. But I still sit on the board of IPAC today, with its 26,000 clients, a lot of whom have been with me for the full 34-year journey, which I really treasure. But when I say I used to be an innovator, the reality is the world has changed so much, and that's why a couple of years ago I was just thrilled to become chairman of InvestSMART and took a reasonable stake in the company as part of that process. Because here you see the next revolution, and the next revolution in advice is exactly what we're doing here. It is about significantly lower costs and transparency. I'm really proud of IPAC's role in the industry because many firms, of course, followed IPAC, realising that there was a conflict if you weren't charging for the advice you give. You're going to flog stuff, which is often not in the consumer's interest. And of course, now legislation requires that to happen anyway, but it took a long time coming. And some of the stuff I've seen done to consumers over the years, which you probably saw me banging on the Money TV show about, it's just really, look, I'm just not comfortable with it. So in a sense, that was probably a good thing for me. In a sense, at least I could see that the consumer was going to pay a fee and therefore wasn't going to get conflicted advice. That's got to be good. But to be quite blunt, there are many of us, me included, who don't really need an advisor doing everything for you. And the problem is, this is a real problem for an advice business. Before you can even tell someone who walks in with 10 grand to put the money in the mortgage, which is probably the right advice for a younger person still, to be quite honest with you. It's pretty boring. But before you can even tell them to do that, you've got to spend 4 or 5 hours with them and complete a 62-page statement of advice. In fact, Greg Medcraft, I chair the Australian Government Financial Literacy Board, which sets financial literacy strategy at federal government policy level. I've done that for the last 6 prime ministers. And that actually is a credit to both political parties. Normally, if you're a Liberal, I got appointed by John Howard. If you're a Liberal appointee, when government changes, you send in your resignation. In that case, Kevin Rudd said, no. So I'm getting rid of the other 634 Liberal bodies. Yours, I want to stay. Money skills is really important, and what you people are doing is valuable. So I'm on my 6th Prime Minister now, and the work we've done in the schooling system to change the school curriculum to build money skills into core subject matter for kids. Financial literacy is now a key statement of learning in our national curriculum. I'm really excited about that. You know, you change things slowly. So for me, what's the next innovation? Well, while I'm actually generally pretty happy, to be quite blunt, despite some of the stuff you read in the papers, and I agree some awful things have happened and the banks get the daylights appropriately kicked out of them when things go wrong around advice, and I agree with that completely. But you know, 30 odd years ago, if you'd said to me, Paul, you know, and I get this all the time 30 years ago, I was a lot younger, I'm 61 now, but back then it was, who do I send my mum to? Who do I send my widowed mum to? I had a very, very short list 30 years ago. Today, I've got a really big list. But here we've got this really exciting thing happening called the next revolution, which is obviously transparency's there. I generally think advice is a lot better, by the way. I really do. And you won't read about the good advice in the media. You'll read about the stuff that goes wrong, and that's appropriate. You need to keep pressure on people. I'm into that. But the one thing we do know is even with good advice, the overriding issue in this climate of relatively lower returns in most asset classes is cost. Cost is just a known. And this is where this revolution is really exciting. Now, obviously, you can participate in lowering costs by doing a bit more yourself. By going online, you might subscribe to Intelligent Investor, you might use InvestSMART. I mean, I certainly use the InvestSMART's free portfolio wrapper for my investments. You know, why would I pay someone 1 or 2% to do it when I can do it myself for nothing? And the difference is, I've got to load my own products, and a bit the way you do. I occasionally need to email Ron on the team and say, mate, I can't make this thing work, but it's getting better and better and better. And this is the modern world. So it is about transparency, and is also particularly about low cost. And I'm really big on low cost because, as I mentioned, I'm 61, turning 62. And the simple reality is that cost is the one known. And if I can reduce cost, particularly in these times, my return becomes higher by the cost reduction. It's the one way I can earn more on my money without increasing my level of risk is reducing fees. I think it's really important. And it is going to be, I feel a bit like talking to people 34 years ago about why you should pay a fee for advice, and people would look at me blankly. And now, of course, I'm saying cost is a critical component in this. You can strip cost out if you choose to make that, but if you need to go and see a great advisor and pay that person, you need that advice, absolutely good on you. Because here today, I'm one of those people who've currently got a transition to retirement pension going. Because I'm slightly over 60, it's a wee bit easier for me. But as you'll go through with Bruce and Max today, the simple truth is, like many general practitioners, with my superannuation, and my wife is also just over 60, am I actually going, I'm a GP, I think I need a bit more specialist support here. So I'm a so-called advisor who is going out and talking to the super specialists because I need help as well. I don't want to get this one wrong because my working life, and it's okay, Ron will be around for a while, but when you're at a funeral, life becomes a bit poignant, doesn't it? And so, time does tick by. So for me, I only want to really open it up today. And for me, a really interesting issue. Who's got the slide button? Just flip it onto this, would it? In a sense, disclaimer, that'll be bloody helpful. Okay. In a sense, superannuation for me is not an investment, it's a structure. These guys are going to give you all the sort of stuff that you need to be able to help you make better quality decisions. I do strongly encourage you to seek personal advice if you need it, but, you may be able to take what you hear today, go online and so on. So at the end of the day, if we agree that superannuation is not an investment, it's a tax structure, obviously the stuff we put in that tax structure, which Ron Hodge, CEO and chair, sorry, I just replaced myself, Ron, the CEO and Managing Director will talk about, is, my most common question, but what do I invest in? Sydney property looks pretty expensive. Would anyone argue that Sydney property is cheap? Pretty expensive, isn't it? The resolution to that is going to be absolutely fascinating. Do any of you in this room see imagine you're a politician and you're promising to improve housing affordability. What's the best way really of doing that? Halve the population. Works a treat. Have you heard of supply and demand? We are pushing shit uphill with a pointy stick here, folks. It is a very, very difficult equation, and the reason I popped this up for you is obviously this is the current world population. I could have given you births and deaths and all sorts of terrifying things. But what is fascinating is that world population, that number you're seeing in front. It's available to you online, by the way. Just pop in world population. You'll see all the calculators from the World Bank and so on. Now this, of course, is net. So it's netting out deaths. Now what I find really interesting is there's going to be about 93 million new people on the planet this year. I find that important. I'm a supply and demand person. Yes, I'm a professor in economics out at Macquarie Uni, but I don't need to be any of that. I only need to go back to year 7 of school at Griffith High School, where my, not economics teacher in year 7, but my commerce teacher said, it's all about aggregate demand. And I went, what the hell's aggregate demand? This simple argument that the economy is just us. It's just us. Whatever we do. If we all leave Sydney, what happens to Sydney housing prices? They're non-existent. If we all never buy a car again, if we all never shop in Woolies, what happens? It's bleedingly obvious, isn't it? So I'm not going to try and tell you when a market crash is going to happen because I don't know. Like most media commentators, I'm a genius at telling you after it's happened, and I'll explain in great detail why it happened. I don't believe I can pick market tops and bottoms, bluntly. I'd be a billionaire if I could. You know, I always love those folk who say, come to our seminar, we'll tell you how to get rich. I ring them up and try and get them on a little TV story, because if they're telling you to get rich, I want to know how rich they are. Because I suspect they get rich by you coming to their seminar. And I don't think much disagreement about that either. So basically, it isn't that simple. So the one thing for me that is simple and makes sense is this idea of aggregate demand. And so I'm really fascinated, and amongst all the bad news you get in the media, I really would like you to look at the latest World Bank report on how we've slightly more than halved global poverty in the last 10 years. This is an extraordinary human achievement. This is extraordinary. And amongst terrible stories, Syria and all like just awful stuff on your television that will bring tears to your eyes legitimately. We're actually, you know, that's the stuff that makes the headlines. And as I know from my time at Channel 9, there's a simple story, which a money story is never going to get. But certainly in news and current affairs, there's a very, very simple rule. If it bleeds, it leads. That's your headline. If it bleeds, it leads. So stories like the World Bank report about halving world poverty, just, you know, there's just no blood there. It's kind of a good story. You can't be running that. So not only are we getting rapidly wealthier globally, the poor are getting less poor, which is really exciting. So purchasing power is going up. And so for me, and this is the only point I'm going to try and get across today, for me, this is the key information I need for the assets I hold inside a structure called superannuation. And you've heard me saying for 30 years, despite all the changes and so on, I am fanatically strong on superannuation. Now, whether it's 1.6 million or not, I mean, you know, someone's telling me the worst possible news is I'm going to pay 15% tax on assets above 1.6 million. Well, what happens if I put it in I pay 48% tax in my name. Lordy, 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 only 15%, thank you, Lord. So for me, it really is a remarkable thing. So it's a useful tax structure, but what I'm going to stuff it full of, I'm going to stuff it full of stuff I think those people want. A problem we have with housing. My life expectancy at the moment is it's about 27 years actually. And if I don't drink too much beer at the wake, I might extend it a bit. But the thing for me is in 27 years' time, what is fascinating is we went to the Bureau of Stats last night. In 27 years' time, Sydney's population is 8.1 million, is the median projection from both Bureau of Stats and Treasury. 8.1 million. How are you going to solve housing prices as a politician when the population, 3 million new people living in Sydney? So does any of you in this room think that property will be cheaper in 27 years' time? No, I'm with you. We seriously, the only time we're going to get this, it is simple supply. And yes, absolutely. Do I think negative gearing is a crappy rule for first home buyers? Yes, I do. It gives people like me and probably you leverage a first home buyer doesn't have. Do I think the CGT is too generous? Yes, I do. Because it transitions wealth towards the top 5% of the population. I don't want our society to be biased to the rich. I don't want to be like America, where the median American, okay, not the average, the median, the person in the middle, the median American, which is about the 123rd millionth person, the middle American is worth 53,000 American dollars. You go left of that, every single one of that 50% of the population to the other side is worth less than total net wealth of 53 grand. There you'll get social dislocation. There you'll get disruption. There you'll get a Donald Trump audience, no matter what your beliefs are. It just makes sense. What's our median wealth? Second highest in the world. The middle Australian, about the 12 millionth person, and please feel free to look all this stuff up, is worth about 240,000 American dollars. I'm using 53 American and 240. Feel free to look it up. It's all online for you, the World Bank, blah, blah, blah. Interesting stats. So why do we tend to get why do we get more cohesion? Why are we such a successful, wonderful, multicultural society, which brings so much benefit to all of us, apart from Bill Shorten's recent ad, which was a bloody stroke of genius, wasn't it? Lordy, 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 what was he thinking? Anyway, I don't know where that one came from. Although did you see a wonderful blog about Bill Shorten's ad with all the typical white Australians, white Anglos? I love that one where someone put at the blog, I think one of them's from Adelaide. So that caused me some mirth. So population grows. Australia becomes, in my lifetime, probably about 33 million people. And so I'm curious, if the population is that, and unless we get hit by an asteroid or bubonic plague, that's not in my investment parameters. That's all a bit too hard for me. I know it happened in Europe in the 12th century and 14th century. I know all that. But it's really hard for me to build asteroids into my modelling. It's just really difficult. So I leave that a bit alone. So I stick with fundamental demand. And I look at these people and I think, gee, will they eat? Woolies probably looks all right with a long-term view. Coles looks all right. Will they live in a house? Will they have a roof over their head? Will they buy a car? Will they be richer or poorer? Well, particularly with no death duties in this society, and we won't go there, she'll throw rocks at me, particularly with no death duties, wealth is accumulating and aggregating really quickly. Growing population. So for me, I'm saying to my adult kids, look guys, if you can get into the market, I think you'd better, because this idea it's going to be cheap, at some point in time, we're sure to get a property downturn, by the way. It's sure to go down 30% at some point in time, for reasons I don't know. But do you think 10 years after whatever happens that forces prices back down again, based on your experience of the property market, after a major downturn a la 1990 where rates hit 18.75%, did you find your property was worth 3 or 4 years later what it was? Again, of course it was. Supply and demand. So for me, it's about thinking about logic. I'm fascinated in population trends. These guys are going to help you enormously with taxing and structuring. But please don't forget, superannuation is a tax structure. Our job is to stuff it full of investments that work for the future, and all I'm saying is your best guide, the no bullshit guide, is aggregate demand. And I'm interested in having investments in my fund, whether it's aggregate demand and technological and medical change. Bleedingly obvious, right? It's the sort of thing where, it's always, this is one place, it's not hindsight. When Sonic listed at $2, I said, what the hell does Sonic do? And they take people's blood, used to be Hanley Moyer. And that blood goes to a vast machine and produces a report. I went out and spoke to a few of my medicine mates, and I said, this looks pretty interesting. Are we going to get more tests or less? And they said, are you an idiot? We're going to get any number of tests, cholesterol, vitamin D, PSA, you name it. You're going to, I mean, how much blood do you lose each year to your doctor? And it's a very cheap test, really. I love businesses like that. You lose a bit of blood, 47 tests get done, including vitamin D. A machine spits out a report. You don't pay a huge amount for it. Wow. That's a business that I want to own. And we have done consistently over. So it's common sense stuff. I don't have anything clever for you. In fact, nothing. In fact, I should go to the wake and leave you to it because I'm useless. But that really is my very simple view on life. So my advice to you is think about aggregate demand, think about where people are going to live, where they're going to eat, what they're going to eat. You can be as clever as you like. Obviously, you need global. Our markets are so small here, you won't get exposure to some of the biochem, biotech. You just won't get that here. Some of the really interesting advances in medicine. So sure, and it's so easy through very, very low-cost ETFs to get exposure to that these days. And this is where InvestSMART is very helpful. It can give you a hand doing all this for very, very low costs and complete transparency. So as chairman of InvestSMART, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to pass you on to the people you really want to hear from. And the only thing that does piss me a bit is, to be quite honest with you, I actually need to hear from these people as well. So will someone take notes and tell me later? Thank you very much.